So, I'm kind of a nerd. I know, that's shocking, right? That's a huge surprise. I love space and NASA, and, as any red blooded American ought, I love Lego. Which means that this is probably going to be my favorite thing ever. This is the Lego Saturn V set. It comes from the Lego Ideas system, which is where somebody like me or somebody like you can come up with an idea for a Lego set and make a model of it and submit it to Lego. And if you get enough people that are also interested in it, Lego will look at it and review it and decide if they're going to build it or not. And this is one that they decided to build. And I am so excited for it. It's massive and it's super complicated. And I'm just going to get right into it. So let's build some Lego. All right, so first things first, one of the things they've been doing more recently with some of these larger sets is they are now numbering the bags and making it a lot easier to get to these various parts as you need them. So you've got bag number 11 here, and bag 12, bag 3. Now these are the building instructions, and it is just, well, for one, it's a massive set, so there are a lot of pages to go through here. But also, it is a beautifully packaged thing. And this is just a beautiful design. It actually makes it look like this old vintage book on the Saturn V rocket. And they've got a couple of pages on the design of the rocket itself and the Apollo missions. This one is technically the Apollo 11 mission, the first one to land on the moon, and some pages on the people who actually designed it. Both the Lego Ideas civilian designer, if you will, and the people working at Lego that refined this design to what we have in front of us today. So let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to start with organizing our bags. Bag number 1 is our first one. We'll go ahead and place the rest. All right, there we go. There are all the parts that we're going to go. Let's start with bag number 1. So we'll start with bag number 1, which is the interior structure for the first stage of this rocket. So yeah, this looks like it's going to be complicated. Let's do it. Now, you might be looking at this right now and thinking, that's a lot of color. And that the Saturn V rocket is this big black and white thing. And yes, it is. And yes, this is a lot of color. But this almost entirely is just the interior structure that's going to hold this rocket together. It is a big model, and it takes a lot of really clever engineering. I mean, look at that, to hold all of this together. And there we go. That's the first bag. This is essentially the first stage of the rocket, but the interior superstructure. Now we're going to get to putting together the shell that goes on the outside of this. And for that, we need bag 2. Now, because this is a NASA rocket, invariably it's going to be emblazoned with various emblems of NASA in the United States, including the letters U, S, and A. And these are printed bricks. They aren't these stickers that you might have thought you would find in some older sets. And one of the very smart things that they've done with the design of this model was to build in modularity. It's round, it's very repetitive all around. So they have designed it such that you're building a lot of times 4 of the same module that will be repeated in sequence around the rocket's body. There we go. That's starting to look a little bit more like a rocket now, isn't it? Time for bag 3. We've got another one of the unique for this set printed pieces. This one is the American flag, and that is adorned again 4 times around the side of this rocket. This is already a relatively large model, and this is just the first stage of the Saturn V rocket. There were 3 stages, if you'll remember. There's the initial launch stage, and then there was a second stage to help get it further up into orbit, and then a 4th stage to blast the darn thing out towards the moon. Sorry, a 3rd stage to blast it towards the moon. So this is just one of 3 stages, plus all the stuff that goes on top of the rocket. We're just getting started here. Time for bag number 4. And there are a lot of smaller design choices on this that you're wondering, why would they use 2 bricks when they could have used just 1? For instance, there's 1 black brick, the flat plate here, and then 2 white ones. Why? Well, some of it's aesthetics, but also part of it is so that they could get to a total piece count of 1,969. That'd be 1969, or the year of the Apollo 11 moon landing. So I've been saying a lot that this set was designed. And truth be told, the further I'm getting into this, the more I'm seeing is that it's not so much designed as it was engineered. This is already a remarkable design, and it's really solid. There's no chatter or wiggle in this, and it's only partially assembled. And they've done some really clever things, like setting up these pivoting points in here so that you can attach the vertical rails that go up in here and maintain that almost entirely cylindrical look that you expect from a rocket. I made a mistake. I attached this one stud higher than it was supposed to be, and now I got to figure out how to get that part off. Darn it. Okay, crisis averted. Take it easy when you're doing Lego. Don't hurt yourself. There we go. Now that is right where it belongs. Beautiful. Now, there are some people who advocate for a Lego building system where you take everything out of the bags and organize it and group all the things together and make sure that everything is all nice, neat, and organized so that you can build as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now me, I like to do things quickly and efficiently, yes, but I feel like doing it that way takes a lot of the joy out of building a Lego set. The search to find that piece in just the pile of pieces that you have. The delight when you find it. And just the fact that you're taking something that's just this mess of bricks and turning it into hopefully a really impressive model. Either it's from the kit and the instructions that come with it, or maybe you're putting together your own personal creation. Either way, I like to just start with the mess of bricks. Now, it's a little bit easier with these numbered bags, and that helps keep it a little bit organized versus having, almost 2,000 pieces just spread out all over the table and searching for one of these random little white nubby peg things. But it's still a lot more fun, I think, to do it this way than to just have everything neatly organized and you know exactly where every piece you need is and everything is clean and efficient. After all, even if we're building this really impressive rocket, Legos are still toys. And you gotta have some fun with it, right? Ah, that's why that was a tight fit. I screwed up again. I put one too many of these little white caps in the fuel lines, so I gotta pop those back out and fix that. That explains why they're kind of a tight fit and they bow out really easily. Easy fix. There we go. See, speed building doesn't do you much good because sometimes you get going a little too fast and you make dumb mistakes like I do. Three, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And like that, we've got these nice, awesome fuel lines running down the entire length of this first stage. It's actually really clever engineering still. I'm really impressed. There we go. That's the first 100 steps, and we are about a quarter of a way through. What have I gotten myself into? Time for bag 5. Okay, yeah, this actually is 5. Now, bag 5 is full of lots of tiny pieces, including a whole bunch of white vents, because what we're building right now is the vent structure that goes around this portion of the rocket, and they want to have it be vented, but still, you know, cylindrical. So lots of tiny pieces, and we're going to end up with lots of faces going into this. So all right, so this starts to explain some of this really complicated internal structure that we've got going on inside here, because these various little attachment points pivot off. This will pivot off of those attachment points so they can build a more close to circular venting structure around this. It's clever. That managed to conjure up this system. It's incredibly solid. There's barely any give in any of these little pieces here. And to make this circular feel, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16 faces to bridge all the way around the circular shape of this rocket. That's impressive. And I'll tell you what, it's looking darn good. Now it's time for bag 6, and we're gonna make some rocket engines. Not only do these parts help with the look of the rocket, they help with the stability too of the entire model. They're pulling these side panels in and latching them in such that you'll have to deliberately pull these parts off if you ever want to take the darn thing apart. Oh, that's nice. There's some very clever reuse of existing parts to reorient the rocket. Some very clever use of existing parts to give the rocket and the motors the appearance that you would expect from the original, Saturn V rocket. There's supposed to be a lot of mechanics and piping down there, and they're doing things like picking up the octagonal crow's nest piece and parts of the Lego barrel, cast in different colors, of course. These are nice dark gray versus the brown that you might be used to seeing them in, but taking existing pieces and repurposing them so that they can be used in this sort of model. It's really, really unique engineering. All right, this is the first stage of the Saturn V Lego rocket. I just want to show you the tremendous detail that has gone into the engines and rocket motors on this thing. It is absolutely incredible the amount of detail and attention that has gone to, at least at this scale. You would make a much larger one, but then it'd be absurdly expensive and very complicated and very big. And this is already quite large, but even this stage already is quite sturdy and remarkably detailed, and I am falling in love with Legos. So that's the first stage. We got 2 more stages to go, and then some various modules and people go. So let's keep going. So the second stage of the Saturn V rocket It's the same diameter as this first stage. So you can expect we're going to see a lot of the same building techniques going into this second stage. It's not as complicated as the first stage was, but there's still going to be a lot in common with what was built before. This is the first major Lego set that I've built in some time. So there's some pieces in here that I haven't seen before, which is, I guess that's nice to see that Lego is still going out of their way to make new pieces to fit the needs of other model kits. But from what I've read, none of these pieces are at least unique in design. Some of them are unique colors for this kit and perhaps unique printing for this kit, but they didn't make any specific unique pieces for this kit, which is encouraging because I like that they worked with what they had, which is what anybody who's building a kit for the Lego Ideas community has to do. You can't make your own Lego bricks. I suppose you could. You have the ability today to go out and design and 3D print your own Lego bricks if you really need to. But they didn't do that for this one. All of the bricks that go into building this massive, complicated, beautiful Saturn V rocket are bricks that you can get from other sets. Perhaps, again, not in the same color, but at least in the same spirit and design ethos, in the way that, Lego sometimes doesn't do that. They'll just build a single brick for the purposes of making a model that looks like what it's supposed to look like. With some of the Star Wars stuff and whatnot, they'll come up with very large, complicated single-piece bricks to meet the needs of the model versus what we expect from Lego. So that's the basic substructure that goes into the stage 2 of the Saturn V rocket. And you can see, again, we've got very complicated structuring and facing going on here. And that's, again, so we can build the same sort of vent structure on the second stage and have a mostly cylindrical look to it. It's just absolutely amazing bits of engineering going into this. It seems like it's way too complicated when you're putting it together, but as soon as everything starts to come together, you realize, oh, that's why it went that way. And it's just absolutely marvelous to look at when you're realizing oh, no, I made a mistake. Let's see if I can get in there. Like it never even happened. All right. On to bag 8. So with bag 8, we're going to start assembling the outer skin of stage 2, the Saturn V rocket, and that includes some new custom printed pieces. These are just standard 1x6 plates, but they've got this very nice United States printing happening on them that you can't get in any other set. So I guess let's get to putting together this. I'm good with words after I Lego for a while. Yeah. I made a mistake. I got ahead of myself, made assumptions about what this model was going to be and how various parts were going to look, and then I made a mistake. So you undo it, and then you pay attention to what the instructions say, because they are correct, and they will not lead you astray if you actually pay attention. Don't be like Derek, basically. There we go. It's 2 bits of this. Now what's been kind of neat about this second stage so far is, unlike the first stage where you built many parts 4 times to build a whole section and then you detach them all, each of these so far, just 2, have been different, like notably different, and you weren't told to build any of them twice, which is unique. This second stage is actually a little more interesting than the first, so I'm going to keep this going. All right, second stage is starting to come together. We've got some very nice detailing on here, especially with the another fuel line running down the outside of the rocket that'll connect the 2 tanks inside of combustible fuel. Now we're going to get to bag number 9, which contains mostly the outer shell of the second stage. So let's put it together. So bag 9 just sort of flies together, mostly because you're just putting together very large sections of the hull of the second stage. Now we're going to move on to the detailed bits, including the cowling up here, the engine, rocket engines down here, and the vents around the sides. You'll find all of that in bag 10. So this is really clever. They designed these vent pieces. They're very similar to the pieces that are going in here. But they had you put in different colored clips for the black end here that match the curved piece you're putting it on top. So yellow to yellow. There we go. And then when I go to fill in this piece, it's red on the inside, and the instructions call for using the red curved piece on top. Very clever. Clever, clever, clever. It's a nice bit of smart detailing here along the top. I was wondering how they were going to get this nice even cowling that sort of tapers in up towards the third stage. And they combined it with the sort of sloped cockpit type piece from very older Legos, along with a very unique combination of moving parts that just sort of fold in and give it a nice, clean, tapered look that can't really get any other way with Lego. Are a nice little bit of detail with some unique part choices as well. They've used the wheels from the tracks. If you have a tracked wheel vehicle, they've used the wheels that would go in that, along with a little dome piece with a rod run through it to hold it all together, and nice little small bits of combustion, because by the time this rocket is firing, it's way up in the upper atmosphere and even out into outer space. And so even though stuff is combusting, you're not going to get nearly as big as a flame as you would with the first stage rockets. All right, now this is interesting. These points right here, the clips are designed to clip right into the hooks in the first stage. So all of this should seat right together, attach, and now we have a nice big two-stage rocket. These are just the first two stages that are used to help get the Saturn V command and lunar modules and the astronauts up into orbit. Then this all does detach, a little bit of force. It should all come undone. You never know quite how much it's supposed to take. I don't want to break everything all over the place. There we go. It all comes off, and you can have your second stage with the third stage on top of it. Continue to rock it on out. So, speaking of that third stage, let's go ahead and put that together. That calls for bag 11. Now, it might seem kind of counterintuitive, but the third stage of the Saturn V rocket is much smaller than the first or the second stages. And that's because these have actually done the hard work. And that's not even really escaping Earth's gravity. And building a rocket that goes up isn't a terribly arduous task. The harder part is achieving escape velocity. And that is more sort of linear velocity in comparison to the, there we go, talking and picking up pieces. It works out great every time. Compared to just lifting, doesn't take that much effort, if you would say, in comparison to the velocity that you need to reach in order just to achieve orbit. Orbital velocity, of course, varies depending on how high of an orbit you want to achieve. But once you're actually up there and you've escaped the Earth's atmosphere and you're shuttling right along fast enough orbitally, really, or really orbiting the Earth so much, right? It is an orbit, but it's that you are avoiding going slow enough that you fall in. Orbit is really a controlled fall. You're going fast enough that you don't fall back into the atmosphere. A little bit of a boost to ensure that they stay in orbit, because the atmosphere doesn't just end at any given point. It fades away, and you have to be very, very, very far out, close to what they call geosynchronous orbit, where a satellite will stay in the same spot to avoid atmospheric drag. It is, if you will, kind of a drag. I'm sorry, that was lame. I shouldn't have done that. Oh no, I dropped Legos. I think it's just those two. We'll see soon enough, I suppose. So to actually exit the atmosphere and get up to that orbital velocity requires a lot more rocket and therefore a lot more fuel. And these are, the rocket engines are just the small parts down here. This is just a giant fuel canister is really what it is. And same thing with the second stage. It's almost entirely a fuel canister. The entire Saturn V rocket is almost entirely a big, giant fuel canister. And the work that they've done in building rockets that get to the moon, and even rockets that escape Earth's orbit entirely and go to other planets, is, again, almost entirely that rocket is to get up and out of the atmosphere and into orbit. Getting out of orbit, you're already going fast enough, you just got to add a little bit more momentum, and you can spiral right out. The trajectory that the Apollo rockets took to get to the moon was actually very similar to that. They launched up, they went around in orbit, orbited a bit, and then shot off and orbited the moon, and then came back down to Earth. The rocket itself, big old fuel tank, a couple of motors, but mostly fuel. So it turns out I actually dropped 3 pieces. Now I just need to figure out where the other one of these went. It's on the floor somewhere. Yeah, I'll be back. Turns out I didn't drop that piece. It was just hidden right there. So maybe there is some benefit to the thought of organizing all of your pieces and everything, of having all your stuff neatly laid out before you start in, but at the same time, that takes all the fun out of it, and discovering that you're stupid like that. But that's cool. It's fine. It's Lego. You notice there are a good many instances where we're using just these single dots to fill in space, where a 1x2 flat brick would do just fine to accomplish the same task. And like I mentioned earlier, that is all in service of the goal of having a set. That is the Apollo 11 moon lander and Saturn V rocket that adds up to 1,969 pieces. So there's a little bit of extra unnecessary assembly, you could call it, but that's in service of a fun goal, making sure that you are commemorating the Apollo 11 moon landing appropriately. Because, if you come out to finish designing the set and you're at 1,952 pieces, thereabouts, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how many extraneous pieces there are involved in this, but it's pretty easy just to design in some more complicated than necessary bits to reach that goal. And that's fine. Is it more than is needed? Sure, yeah, there's no doubt about that. It doesn't have to be as detailed as this is, but at the same time, that makes for a set. And when you look at that number and you realize why it's that number, it makes you smile. All right, we have here another very clever bit of engineering. We wanted to get this small little pipe running up on the outside. So we've got the sort of like blaster type bits here, nice little cutout in here, bit down here, and ball bearing joints with the receiver here and the balls inside so that it can just clip right in and give you that outside rail. Very clever. These Lego people, they know what they're doing. But I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. Oh, it's upside down. That's it. And there's our third stage rocket. As you can see, it's a lot smaller than either the first or the second stages. Has just a single rocket engine on the bottom of it. Like the others, it is still mostly entirely a fuel tank. This will attach to the second stage. Just on top, it has the same sort of latching system. And it'll just stick right in here. Docks right into place. And with actually less force than is required to detach from the second stage, you can dock that right in there. Okay, so we have our first stage, we have our second stage, and now the third stage. This is where stuff starts to get interesting. We have just one bag left. Bag number 12, but this is actually where all the interesting stuff happens. So this last portion includes all of where all the humans were. This is where you'll find the command module, which was the conical orbital part, the lunar lander. You'll find in here the descent module, lunar module, ascent module, which brought the lunar landing astronauts back up to the command module to come back to Earth, and even the return module, which is the command module, again, though having splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on return, along with cowlings to go over all of this during launch, the escape tower in case something went wrong, and all sorts of other fun and interesting parts. There are even some astronauts in here. So this is a truly interesting part. What we have here is the command module and the support portion of that command module. This portion right here is what went to the moon, but this was all attached on top of that as part of the escape rocket. It was a rocket on top of a rocket, and this was designed that in the event that something went wrong on the launch pad, the astronauts or mission control could trigger these rockets on the top to fire and blast the astronauts, which are all up here in the very top of the rocket, off of the rocket and away from danger, and then a parachute would deploy and lower them safely into the ocean, right next to where they were launching from in Cape Canaveral. Thankfully, this was never used in actual practice. All the launches went off without a hitch, but it's a nice little bit of added safety in an era where space travel was not quite as safe as we wanted it to be yet. And to be honest, it's still not quite there. We've seen plenty of failures of our rocket systems that have put our astronauts in harm's way. It is still a dangerous profession, but you're exploring the final frontier, and there's nothing cooler than that. So this is a fascinating little bit. This is the main part of the lunar descent module. There's a rocket motor that goes underneath, there are going to be legs that attach to this and everything, but we're already getting to the point where we're assembling the ascent module, which is the part that the astronauts were actually in on the way down and on the way back. It has its own rocket motor. And even though it's not really designed to come apart, they still made a point of building in that lunar ascent rocket motor into the bottom of this piece, even though it's completely hidden within the lunar lander as a whole. That's a nice little bit of attention to detail that I really appreciate about this set. Now this is probably the neatest of the printed pieces in this entire set, because it is the iconic face of the ascent module of the lunar lander, and it's printed on the little slider disc part. You normally don't see anything really printed on that piece, but here we have it. And there you have it. There is our lunar lander. Now, before we get to assembling this entire rocket, because it is an impressive model, there's one more, actually a couple more little bits to pull together here. First, there's the display for our lunar lander. For perspective and scale on all of this, this is a microfig astronaut. Tiny little guy compared to scale for this entire rocket. Itsy bitsy little astronaut, giant rocket. I also provided a nice little piece here, one more printed piece. This is the American flag, so that you can have Old Glory flying with you on our little moonscape display. Now, when the astronauts went to the moon, orbited around, did their thing, the interesting part is that while 3 of them went to orbit of the moon, only 2 of them actually got to go onto the moon. And that was simply due to the way that they designed the whole system. The lunar module was only big enough to fit 2. And so 2 of them went down to the moon. On Apollo 11, that was Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, while 3rd stayed up in orbit. And, you know, it was an important part of the mission, but that wasn't necessarily the most exciting. But, you know, they needed to have that 3rd person up there because this was back in an era where the entire computing power that went into designing and operating this rocket is roughly about what you will find in your typical watch. We're not talking about a smartwatch, we're just talking about digital like Casio, nothing fancy about it. And that sort of computing power didn't exist that we have today. The phone that I'm recording this on is infinitely more powerful than anything that NASA and the astronauts had access to back in 1969. So while today we'd be able to leave a whole module up in orbit and easily rendezvous with it, no issue at all. Back then that wasn't a thing that we could do, so somebody had to stay up with the command module and rendezvous with it on the launch of the ascent module from the moon, so they could connect to it, come back home. If not, nobody's going to make it home. So, after they returned from the moon, they had to get back down onto Earth, and they did that via the descent module. Sorry, not via the descent module, that'd be just the return module, which was the command module. On the bottom of it, there was a heat shield. They detached from the big old support module and re-entered the atmosphere. They were going very fast. They had some retro rockets to slow themselves down a bit, control the descent. But the descent was also very hot. That's what happens when you hit the atmosphere going very fast. It causes friction. It's like rubbing your hands together, they get warm. You do that with the air going very, very fast, things are going to get hot. But once they'd slowed down enough, giant parachutes were deployed, and they made a nice splashdown in the ocean with little buoys on top to make sure that things stayed upright, and a large life raft preserver that went around the outside to ensure that the entire thing stayed up and out from underneath the water. Now, while this entire rocket is capable of standing up on its own, I mean, here are all the individual parts standing up just fine. The folks at Lego understand that you might be hesitant about displaying something that ends up being a meter long when it's fully assembled upright. It's relatively sturdy, I mean, it's not going anywhere, but it also just sort of slides around, it's not really mounted on anything. So, they built for us these nice little bases that come in the box, and they enable you to take apart the rocket and have something that you can display versus just having these pieces sitting about. So there are stands designed such that the first and second stages have a little bit shorter stands. Third stage being narrower when it's all assembled, needs a bit of a taller stand. And that is all of the building that goes with this. Lego's very smart and at least provides us some extra pieces. I didn't miss anything. They just include some extra pieces and smaller bits because, you know, it can happen. Stuff gets lost. I only dropped 3 pieces in assembly. Got them all back, thankfully. But yeah, even a nice little astronaut. A little fourth just in case. Let's put this entire rocket together, shall we? Let's start from the top, smaller bits into bigger bits. So we should be careful with these things. We have third stage, fairings that go around the lunar module, and the command module that goes with it. So, lunar module, we'll just pop you right on there. These hold in our legs. Attach the first bearing, there we go. The rocket, now this is really clever. It attaches inside there. You could actually display this if you really wanted to as a cutaway with the command module sitting on top and your module. We're going to do that, put the entire thing together. So I've got, loosen that back up, stick our second fairing on, secure that. We're going to move these guys out of the way here. All right, so we have our third stage. Get to the moon, get on the moon, get into orbit. All right, this will just pop right into there. There we go, nice and secure. All right, getting into orbit. And the first stage, this is the beast. All right, everything lines up, pops in nice and secure. There we go. Oh, that's amazing. So, and here's the great part about this. This model is really well built. I can hold all the way out here, and it's all still just holding itself together with no problem at all. I'm not feeling any stress and wiggle throughout this entire thing. It's a very solid kit. I am very impressed. You know, we've got this massive meter-long rocket that they've managed to make out of Lego. This, again, came from the Lego Ideas program, which is where people like you, people like me, we can design something like this rocket and submit it to Lego, and if enough people like it, they'll consider it, and they'll build it and sell it, and that's exactly what they did here. This is a very, very impressive feat of Lego engineering. I am just absolutely amazed by this. I'm very happy that I got it. Let's stick that right there. There we go. Oh, look at that. That is beautiful. Man. Where were these Lego kits when I was growing up? This is really impressive. So that, in a nutshell, that is the Lego Saturn V rocket kit. And lunar lander, and astronauts, and command module, and 3 stages that separate. This is a hell of a model. I am absolutely enthralled with this thing. If you have ideas on awesome Lego sets you can build, take them to the Lego Ideas community. build your set, show it off. Maybe they'll make it. Maybe they'll make something amazing like this. There's just one thing that I want after this. I want the crawler and the launch tower. I can have a whole big display. I'll have to find some place to put it, but damn, that'd be cool. So yeah, that's it.